Ready to dive deep. Today we're cracking open Morgan Housel's The Psychology of Money.
Yeah, this one's a bit different.
It's not your typical how to invest book.
No, it's more about, I guess you could say, the mental game?
Exactly. Less about spreadsheets, more about why we do what we do with money.
All those hidden forces driving our decisions, sometimes against our best interest.
Right. I mean, he starts off with these two contrasting stories, and I was hooked.
Ronald Reed, the janitor, who ended up with, what was it, $8 million?
Yeah, $8 million, just quietly investing over decades.
And then you've got Richard Fuscone.
Harvard MBA.
Went bankrupt.
Just how is that even possible?
Well, that's what the book is all about, right? It's not always about being the smartest guy in the room.
It's about behavior.
Consistency, patience, those unglamorous things.
Which honestly can be harder than picking stocks.
Oh, absolutely. And that leads us to this idea Housel calls the 0.000000001% problem.
The what?
Basically, our own experience with money, no matter how long we've lived.
It's just a tiny, tiny sliver of all financial history.
Exactly. But we tend to think, oh, this is how it always works.
Our little window is the whole picture.
Yeah, my grandpa lived through the Depression, so all he talked about was saving every penny.
And he thought that was the only way.
Right. But someone who grew up in the 90s .com boom might be all about risky bets.
Totally different worldview.
Housel even uses this story about JFK.
Okay, what about JFK?
Well, because of his family's wealth, he was totally oblivious to the struggles of the Great Depression.
It didn't even register.
Yeah. Highlights how different backgrounds create completely different views about risk investing.
What even counts as wealthy probably means different things.
Totally. And there's research showing that your tolerance for risk is hugely shaped by the economic conditions you lived through as a kid.
So, if you grew up during a recession.
You might be wired to be more cautious, even if things are booming now.
And vice versa. Someone who came of age when everyone was getting rich quick.
Might be more likely to chase the next hot thing.
Wow, so we're all kind of walking around with these subconscious money scripts based on our past.
It's wild to think about. And then there's this question of enough.
Enough.
Yeah, Housel tells this story about John Bogle.
Oh, the Vanguard guy?
Yep. He was at a party with a billionaire hedge fund manager, and the guy was bragging about how much he made in a day.
I can't even imagine.
But then author Joseph Heller, he was there too, and he simply said, yes, but I have something he will never have.
What's that?
Enough.
Oh, wow.
Powerful, right? You can have billions, but if you always feel like you need more.
But you're on a treadmill, never getting off.
Housel contrasts this with stories of people like Rajat Gupta and Bernie Madoff.
Incredibly wealthy, but got caught up in financial crimes.
They wanted more, even though they had more than most people could dream of.
So maybe enough is less about a number and more about a state of mind.
Exactly. Housel says one of the hardest financial skills is getting that goalpost to stop moving.
Oh, I like that. It's deciding when you're actually winning the game.
Instead of just chasing more points forever.
But how do you do that in a world that's constantly telling you to buy more, achieve more, be more?
It's tough. But that's where understanding the psychology of money comes in.
Okay, so let's unpack that.
One key concept Housel dives into is the power of compounding.
Interest on interest.
Yeah, but he describes it in this really cool way.
How so?
He says it's like the cool summers that trigger ice ages.
I wouldn't have thought of that.
It's these small changes over time that lead to massive outcomes way down the road.
Oh, so it's not the dramatic stuff, it's the little things that add up.
Exactly. Saving an extra $50 a month might not seem like much now.
But over decades.
It can snowball into something huge.
But that's hard, right? Because we want to see results now.
Our brains aren't wired to think that long term.
We want the instant gratification.
Yeah. Housel uses these vivid examples like the growth of hard drive storage.
How's that an example?
Well, think about it. Storage capacity has exploded exponentially.
Yeah, I guess it has. My phone holds more than my old computer.
Right. But that happened gradually, not all at once. We tend to underestimate the power of these slow, steady changes.
So is it just about being patient and playing the long game?
A lot of it is. Not getting distracted by the latest trends or get-rich-quick schemes.
Just sticking with it, even when it doesn't feel exciting?
That can be the hardest part. We all want the overnight success story.
But those are so rare, right?
Exactly. Most wealth is built slowly, consistently, almost boringly.
Makes me think of those stories about people who invested a little bit in, Coca-Cola stock back in the day.
And now they're millionaires.
Yeah, just from holding on and letting it grow.
That's the magic of compounding.
Yeah.
But of course, it's not always that simple.
What do you mean?
Well, life throws curveballs. House talks about Jesse Livermore,
Never heard of him.
legendary trader, made and lost multiple fortunes.
Oh, so he knew how to make it, but not keep it.
Yeah. Then there's Abraham Jermansky, ruined by the 1929 crash.
So even if you're doing well, you can still get wiped out.
It happens. Housel suggests that to really succeed long-term, you need a blend of optimism.
Optimism makes sense, but you need more than that, right?
Yeah. He says you need a healthy dose of paranoia, too.
Paranoia, isn't that a bad thing?
Well, not in this context. It's about being aware of risks, even when things are going great.
So it's not about being reckless, but also not being paralyzed by fear.
That's the sweet spot. And that's where room for error comes in.
Room for error. Okay, I'm intrigued.
It's basically building in cushions and flexibility into your financial life.
So if something unexpected happens...
You're prepared, like having an emergency fund.
Right, so you don't have to go into debt if you lose your job.
Exactly. Or if the market takes a dive,
You don't panic and sell everything.
you have the breathing room to ride it out.
This is making me think about my own finances in a whole new way.
That's the power of understanding the psychology behind it all, right? It's not just about the numbers.
There's so much more to it. All right, well, this is clearly just the tip of the iceberg.
We've got a lot more to unpack in part 2.
Can't wait. We'll be back after a short break.
So we've been talking about how our brains can kind of trick us when it comes to money.
Yeah, all those biases and stuff.
Right. But Housel doesn't just leave us hanging with a bunch of problems.
Good, because I was starting to get a little freaked out.
He offers some solutions, or at least ways to think about things differently.
Like what?
Well, he's a big believer in humility.
Humility, like not thinking we're so great.
Kinda, yeah.
Yeah.
Recognizing that luck plays a huge role in success.
Oh, so like being in the right place at the right time.
Exactly. And on the flip side, not beating ourselves up too much when things go wrong.
Because sometimes it's just bad luck, not necessarily our fault.
Right. It's about focusing on what we can control, like our savings rate, our investments.
Our behavior, basically.
Yep. And Housel stresses that true wealth isn't just about how much you make.
It's about how much you keep.
Exactly. And even more importantly, the freedom and flexibility it gives you.
So it's not just the number in your bank account.
It's what that number allows you to do.
Like travel the world, pursue your passions, or just not have to worry about every little expense.
Exactly. He also talks about aligning your financial decisions with your values.
What does that mean exactly?
Like not letting your spending be dictated by what other people think.
Or those keeping up with the Joneses kind of pressures.
Totally. It's about figuring out what you truly care about.
And then making sure your money supports those things.
Right. Like, are you spending on experiences or material possessions?
Are you saving for a down payment on a house or a once-in-a-lifetime trip?
What are your priorities? And are your spending habits reflecting those priorities?
That's deep, man. I'm gonna have to think about that one.
We all should. And of course, saving for the unexpected is huge.
That emergency fund we talked about earlier?
It's like having that safety net so you can handle whatever life throws at you.
Job loss? Medical bills? Car breaking down?
Yeah, all that fun stuff.
Knowing you can handle it without going into debt, that's peace of mind.
Exactly. And Housel also talks about finding joy in the journey, not just the destination.
So it's not all about getting rich and retiring early.
Not necessarily. It's about enjoying the process of building wealth, making progress towards your goals.
So like celebrating small victories along the way.
Exactly. And not getting discouraged if you hit a bump in the road.
That's easier said than done sometimes.
Oh, for sure. But remember, it's a marathon, not a sprint.
And it's probably going to take longer than you think.
Which is why patience is so important. And that brings us back to the power of compounding.
Right, those small, consistent actions over time.
He cautions against trying to time the market or chase quick returns.
Because that usually backfires, right?
More often than not, it's about staying focused on the long term.
Resisting that urge to jump in and out of investments.
Exactly. And remembering that volatility is normal.
Like the market's going to go up and down.
Yeah, it is part of the process.
And trying to avoid those dips might actually make you miss out on the gains.
It's counterintuitive, but true. It's about riding those waves and staying the course.
This is all about mindset, isn't it?
So much of it is. Housel encourages us to define our own definition of success.
Not letting society tell us what it should look like.
Exactly. Not getting caught up in the comparison game.
Which is so hard these days with social media.
Oh, for sure. It's like everyone's trying to portray this perfect life.
And it makes you feel like you're not measuring up.
Right. So it's crucial to tune that out.
Focus on your own path, your own goals.
And what truly matters to you.
Like, what do you want your life to look like?
What are your values? What are your passions? What kind of legacy do you want to leave?
Those are big questions.
but they're worth asking. And Housel argues that one of the best ways to align your finances with those things is to use your money to gain control over your time.
Oh, I like that. Time is the most valuable thing we have.
Exactly. It's about creating a life that gives you freedom and flexibility,
So you can spend your time doing things you love with people you care about.
and not just being stuck in a job you hate because you need the paycheck.
This is making me rethink my whole approach to money.
It's a mind shift, for sure. And it's important to remember that financial success isn't just about personal gain.
What else is there?
It's also about using your resources to make a positive impact on the world.
Oh, like philanthropy and stuff.
Yeah. Supporting causes you believe in, helping others.
It's not just about what you get, but what you give.
And those two things can go hand in hand.
I never thought about it like that before.
Housel reminds us that finance is not a hard science.
It's not all about formulas and spreadsheets.
There's no single right answer. What matters most is finding an approach that works for you.
That aligns with your values and helps you achieve your goals. This conversation has been so eye-opening. I feel like I'm seeing money in a whole new light.
Me too. Housel's book really challenges us to think differently about our relationship with money.
And to make more conscious, intentional choices. So to wrap up this part of our deep dive, let's recap a few key takeaways that have really resonated with me.
Sounds good.
First, financial success is more about behavior than, like, being a financial whiz.
It's about developing those good habits, managing emotions, making consistent decisions.
Second, our own experiences with money, even though they're limited, shape our beliefs in a big way.
So it's important to be aware of those biases and challenge our assumptions.
Third, compounding is like the secret weapon of wealth building.
But it takes patience, like a lot of patience.
Fourth, room for error is crucial, building in those buffers so you can weather the storms.
And take advantage of opportunities when they arise.
Fifth, control over our time. That's the real dividend money can pay.
Freedom to do what you want when you want.
And lastly, defining success on your terms, not letting society dictate it.
Finding what truly matters to you and aligning your finances with those values.
I love those takeaways. It's a good reminder that financial well-being is about more than just like a big bank account.
It's about creating a life that feels meaningful and fulfilling.
And using money as a tool to support that vision.
Now, before we wrap up this whole deep dive, let's shift gears a bit and explore something that Housel touches on in the book that I think you'll find quite fascinating.
Oh, okay. I'm intrigued.
He delves into the history of American consumerism, specifically how things evolved after World War II.
Oh, that sounds interesting. I'm always curious about how historical events have shaped our current relationship with money.
It's a really insightful analysis of how, like, economic policies, social trends, cultural shifts, all these things came together to shape how we spend and how we think about money today.
So where does he start?
He sets the stage with August 1945. World War II has just ended, and there's this like wave of optimism and relief sweeping across the nation.
I can imagine after years of war and rationing, people were probably eager to get back to some sense of normalcy.
Exactly. And to, enjoy the fruits of their labor.
But I bet there was also a lot of uncertainty.
Oh, absolutely. Millions of soldiers were returning home, trying to re-enter civilian life.
And policymakers were probably worried about the economy.
They were terrified of another depression.
The Great Depression was still fresh in everyone's minds.
So they implemented all these policies aimed at stimulating the economy and preventing mass unemployment.
Okay, like what?
One key strategy was to keep interest rates low.
So it was cheaper to borrow money.
Exactly, which encouraged spending and investment.
Basically trying to get people to put money back into the economy.
They also loosened regulations on consumer credit.
So it was easier to buy things on installment plans with credit cards.
Yeah, this was really the beginning of the modern credit card era as we know it.
Wow, I never realized that.
It was a major turning point. And all of this combined with this pent-up demand for goods and services that were scarce during the war.
People were eager to buy new cars, homes, appliances, all that stuff.
It led to a surge in consumer spending.
Which I guess helped fuel economic growth.
Right. Exactly. It kicked off a period of rapid expansion and prosperity, the golden age of capitalism, as some call it.
Sounds like a good time to be alive.
Yeah, in a lot of ways it was. But this boom also had some, let's say, unintended consequences.
Like what?
Well, for one, it led to a big increase in household debt.
Makes sense. If it's easier to borrow money.
People tend to borrow more.
And as consumerism became more ingrained in American culture,
It started to shape people's expectations about what a normal lifestyle looked like.
so instead of just buying what they needed, they started feeling pressure to keep up with the Joneses.
Exactly. And this, combined with rising income inequality later on,
Created a situation where people felt like they had to maintain a certain standard of living.
even if it meant going into debt to do it.
That's a recipe for trouble.
It is. And Housel argues that the 2008 financial crisis was, in part, a consequence of this trend.
So those easy credit policies and the rise of consumerism decades earlier.
They laid the groundwork for the crisis.
Wow, that's pretty profound.
It's a reminder that even when things seem great on the surface, there can be underlying vulnerabilities.
So what's the takeaway from all this?